Hello, and welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now, here's your host for this week, Melissa Stevenson.
Welcome today. This is Melissa, y'all, and we're at Student Ministry Conversations. And we're here talking to my friend Kevin. But if this is the first time you've been on our podcast, please be sure to go over to studentministryconversations.org. You can find past shows, you can find show notes, you can find all kinds of other resources, our blog. And we just hope that what we talk about today can help equip you to be a better youth leader, youth pastor, youth person in whatever church you serve in or whatever area you serve in. So thanks, Kevin, for coming on today.
I'm excited.
Right?
It's happening,
Yeah,
right?
it's so exciting. So some of y'all might notice I'm not in my location. I have stolen Brent's office. And so when my stuff will actually work today, yay. And so there's comic books above me. So I'm hoping they don't get me. So Kevin, tell me a bit about where you're from. What do you do? What's your story? How did you get to where you are?
Yeah. Well, I'm not far from you, Texas-wise.
Right.
We're 2.5 hours away. I'm in Fort Worth, Texas, at a church called Christ Chapel Bible Church. And I've been here for almost 16 years, which is hard to believe. And my current role is I am the central student pastor. So we have 3 campuses, and I oversee the student ministry team on all of our campuses. And it's been a crazy journey. I started in student ministry, I say pre-social media days,
Right. Yeah.
pre cell phone days, all that fun stuff. And so I've seen a lot of things over the years. And I've worked at a couple different churches, but obviously been at this one for a while. And yeah, it's been a fun journey, and I love what I do.
Awesome. Well, and it sounds to me like you've been in youth ministry long enough that what we're going to talk about, you've seen the before and now possibly the after. So
Yes.
you've had that experience. So I love that. And speaking of experience, Brett has very big windows here, and so the experience is showing up on my head a little bit more today than normal, and so I can be there with you. 12 years for me, and went from children's to family to youth, which is where I wanted to be. So I was very excited to get to youth. And I was at First Methodist out in Abilene here, but I was in Fort Worth this weekend, so we kind of saw each other on Download Youth Ministries Facebook page, which is funny because it's a national page. And then when I was like, hey, I want to talk to that guy because that's a great conversation, I was like, oh, wait, Fort Worth, like right there.
Yeah.
Because the podcast itself is national. One of our buddies is in Pennsylvania. So we're all over the nation now. But it was just funny that you were like, oh, just okay, right there.
Oh, yeah, Texas.
Yeah, Texas. It's big state, but we're all right here together.
We're all, yeah.
Right. Okay, so our conversation kind of started with a post you made about your experience with VBS this year, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me
and
that.
my tension, as all good youth ministry stories it begins with my son. So I have a 9-year-old son who has grown up with his dad as the youth pastor. And we are a large church. And I noticed last year was the first year that he pushed back on going against our church's VBS.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so you have, as a parent, you have that tension of, am I going to make my kid go or not go? And last year we made him go, and he just was not having it. Now, I love our church. Our VBS is really cool. It's high production value, but he just did not want anything to do it. He thought it was lame. At the same time, last year and this year, we have next door neighbors who are his best friends. And he's over there all the time. They're over at our house all the time. And they attend a small church in a under-resourced part of town. And he was just so excited about going to their VBS last year and this year as well. And so he does activities at their church throughout the year because it's his best friend. And we've gone, and it's fascinating because one, it's a predominantly Spanish speaking church, so he's one of the only white kids in the when he goes.
Mhm.
But he loves to go, and it's their VBS is very very chill, and um, it's not the cool graphics. It doesn't have all the crazy stuff, and it got me thinking about why is that?
Mhm.
There's probably a various amount of reasons, but really the thing boiled down to he wanted to be with his friends, and so um, while he is a very much a child of technology. I mean, he's on his devices all the time. He's a gamer. For him, production value when it comes to going to a church event was not a high priority, and it was really the connection I made between what I've seen over the last, you know, however many years of
Mhm.
what is true about our students as well. We're a part of a large church, obviously, and well resourced, but the things that drive our students' engagement isn't necessarily the times where we've gone out of our way to do a big, you know, I don't want to say big events because events are still part of it, but
Mhm.
polished kind of feel for an event. And so
The
that's what,
theatrical kind of stuff, like
yeah,
the concert is kind of the wording I was looking at, the concert vibe.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. So that was just really the kind of the impetus of the post, and really as a longtime youth pastor, I really want to help other youth workers win,
Mhm.
and I know the struggle that we have about putting on bigger and better,
Right.
um,
Because we're like comparing
and I just
ourselves
wanted
to
to,
the bigger churches, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I kind of wanted to relieve some of that of like, no, it doesn't take that to have an effective student ministry.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think we've seen the big kind of stuff came up in the end of the 90s, the 2000s into now. And so a lot of our youth people, especially our younger ones, that's the only way they've known to do youth ministry, because it was available to them. And for some of the smaller churches, that may not have been available as far as like budgets or anything like that. So
Hmm.
do you think we're coming down on a swing of coming down from some of that big production value into the more relational ministry?
I think it depends. We all experienced this massive shift a few years ago. A little thing called a pandemic, where we couldn't gather in large spaces, so we had to pivot. And I think we all recognize the power of connection.
Hmm.
When we couldn't connect with one another, we couldn't be in the same room with one another. And so our ministry had to pivot into a much more small group centric kind of idea. I think I worry that churches said, "Oh, we're never going back. This is better. This is greater." And then the moment things started happening, you a lot of churches said, "Okay, well now we can go back to gathering and having big things again. So we're going to do it, and we're going to try to do it again." But I do think that we realized that that wasn't necessarily what students were wanting. So in our person, I hope we've learned as a tribe of youth pastors that connection matters. But I fear that the farther we get away from the pandemic, the more we want to go back to what is flashy and cool
Hmm.
and gets the gets the social media feed buzzing based on what looks good.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're right about the pandemic in there with that, because it was almost like because we could not meet in person, that's what we wanted to, like supply and demand. Like that
Yeah.
we noticed with the kids that's what they were yearning for, was that relationship and those connections, and even just seeing and touching people, which don't touch youth, but the general getting to be with people. And so I
Yeah.
hadn't thought about the pandemic putting a stressor on that. But you're right, we're kind of veering out of that, where we're going back to the way things used to be. But do you think the kids are still yearning for that connection instead?
I think so.
Hmm.
Much more so. The students in our ministry um, are way more excited about being with a small group of friends, whether that is in the midst of a large group or not,
Hmm.
than they are about being in a crowd. And the the context for us, the small group context, have been wildly successful because we've sustained and tried to make that a larger thing. And so I do think that teenagers really want that small pod of friends
Mhm.
more than necessarily craving to be part of a bigger crowd.
Yeah, they want to be that included. They want to be part of. They don't want to be the outcast. They want to be in that little circle. So
Yeah.
it sounds to me like you're getting to be able to do both, though. You're getting to do the small group where they get that feeling, but still be able to do the big stuff.
Yeah, and that's our ministry. The way that it works is we do a large group gathering once a month, and then in-home small groups 3 times a month.
Hmm.
And so it provides some of that interconnection between groups. But we have kids who will show up for those 3 weeks in homes, but won't come to the large group gathering.
That's
I mean,
interesting.
whole small groups. Yeah, whole small groups of kids will be like, if it's not in a house with my friends, I don't
Uh-huh.
want to. I don't want to be there.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask you. Does the big event, does that help you draw those unchurched kids in? Does it help you with your growing your numbers?
I personally think that it's easier for a kid to invite their friend to a small group gathering
Hmm.
than it is to a large group gathering. So if they're inviting their friends, I think it's easier for them to connect in that way. I think if they're a visitor to the church and they're trying to get onboarded, it's easier if you have
Hmm.
some on ramps for connection. I think it's easier to feel a little bit less intimidated if it's not such a uh, oh, I'm noticed and everybody
Hmm.
knows everybody. So I do think there's some purpose in that. But even yeah, so I think that's for sure there.
I think that's really interesting that you said that because it's like a flip on what we've been
Hmm.
seeing in the last couple of years. Okay, so that brings us back to our younger counterparts here. Do you think that this is going to be a harder switch for them, or do you think because they're in that younger group that they already have that yearning and wanting for that connectional relationship anyway? So they're already going, yes, that's what we're doing. Or do you think it's going to be, well, that's what we've done. That's what I've grown up with. How do I do this other thing?
I think that there is always an inertia in ministry in general
Hmm.
for churches, but also for student ministries to gravitate toward the big and the flashy because that feels like you're accomplishing more.
Yes, like you're doing something. Hmm.
Yes. And in ministry, it's hard to define the wins and it's hard to see the growth. And so it is just the natural tendency for us to see a large gathering of kids and put our stamp on, okay, that's an A or that's a B. And then, a gathering with not as many kids, that's a C.
Hmm.
So I think just that natural tendency for us to want to reach more and gather more, you have to be reminded um, and have for us and my team, I talk about what is our vision and our mission and our purpose a lot because we have to make decisions based on what we think is really important.
Hmm.
And we all agree that small gatherings are and small groups are important. So we have to choose to believe that in the long run, that's healthier. And that's just hard to do.
Right.
Um, it's also hard if church leadership,
That's what I was gonna say. Yes, because yeah,
doesn't.
'cause that's what they see is those numbers. That means you're doing your job, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Or even just they walk in the room and they see something big,
mhm.
they're gonna they opt because our leaders, church leaders over us, also come from previous generations of ministry. Many of them were youth workers too, and so they're seeing, well, this is what worked in the past. This is what we should be doing.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about if we're moving back from the big stuff to the small stuff. We're doing a little bit different in our budgets, right? Do you think that
yeah.
that's having an effect on what we're doing? Because we've had, in general, in the United States, less attendance, less tithing, less money. So, do you think that's had an effect on that?
For sure. I think it should be freeing because
I feel that
you
way, right?
can, yeah, you can do a lot more with less if you're focusing on relationships. I think uh, I forget where I heard it, but a while ago, years ago, it was the idea that you can have three things when you're trying to accomplish something. You can have it fast, you can have it good, and you can have it cheap,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't have all three.
Right.
You get two.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can do an effective ministry for relationships, but it's you can do it cheap, but it's going to take a long time to develop those leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a big part of it is, I think, why there's also gravitational push is younger and older youth workers don't either aren't able to develop leaders to
Mm-hmm.
who will then invest in students
Or get them to volunteer in the first place. Like,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Or just don't realize the importance of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so don't prioritize it. So I think for us, the shifting in our budget has to do more with relationship. Whatever budget we have has to shift towards empowering relationships versus the big event. And so, say we have $500, is that money better spent in a an all nighter, or is it better spent in 10 lunches or 15 lunches with leaders where they know and they are cared for so that they are investing in our students?
Yeah. So, like,
I personally think,
yeah, is the cost the big sound system or the training for leaders, the appreciation? Yes, I think
yeah.
I agree with you.
So how you allocate those is also a reflection on that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, I know I had a couple more questions, so I'm going to look at my list real quick. I want to make sure we didn't miss
Sure.
anything. That I
Yeah.
love this this conversation. I love the topic because we were a big church at one time, and our goal is to get back there. But right now we're small, and so sometimes it seems like I should be doing the things that they did when it was big. And
Mm-hmm.
I would rather do relationship ministry because I feel like that's more my wheelhouse anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I can barely work our sound system. So I don't want to get
Yeah.
more things for it. Okay, let's see.
Well, and I think to piggyback on that,
Uh-huh.
the idea is that um, we can't compete with the world.
Right.
It's in terms of production value and whatever, we cannot compete with whatever a student has access to, whether that's concerts or
The internet.
movies or TV shows or whatever, internet. But we can offer something that the world can't give them, which is authentic connection
Yes.
of being known and cared for and seen face to face. And I think that's that part that we can offer that is uniquely of value to teenagers, that they don't have spaces to belong
Hmm.
as much as they used to.
You're totally right. Yeah. Yeah. So we've people say we've lost the third space, the work, the
Mm-hmm.
school. I still say we have church, but it's what we do with it.
Yes.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay, so when we keep talking about how to make those authentic relationships, what have y'all seen in your school system? I know we just got into summer, but are y'all able to go into the schools in Fort Worth? Because we're kind of getting on that verge
Uh,
of about to, I think.
yeah, it's harder for us. We have to be more intentional.
Hmm.
Some schools are more open to it. Um, but yeah, that's something we struggle with because in our context, we have a lot of different schools
Yes.
that we connect with. And so how do you prioritize which schools you go to and how often? And that's why for us, we try to empower our small group leaders to be um, present in their lives and going to games and doing all the things that traditionally was solely the youth pastor's job.
Hmm.
We got to get more leaders who are doing that so that there is, we want our students to see those leaders
Yes.
as their youth pastor.
Well, and there is something to be said when the church shows up for you outside of church.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
my biological children, I have two of them, we don't have grandparents in town. And so when the kids were in elementary school and the churches who showed up for them at their programs Like, my goodness,
Hmm.
the smiles. They were just so taken aback by that. So yeah,
Yeah.
the church showing up in places they don't expect, in a
Hmm.
good way. It is huge. It's huge for their connection to church, but it's also huge for their self-esteem, their self-confidence. Okay, so the practicalities of showing up, how do y'all work it with your, say, sanctuary kind of programs where we need to have those two adults, they need to be background checked. When we're trying to do that relationship ministry, it's what we want to do is just go have coffee. How do you work with that?
Yeah. We constantly push. I don't want to say push back against the policies because we really do believe in creating a safe place where students are protected and our staff is and leaders are protected as well. But student ministry is different than children's ministry because you need to have those relational contexts. So for us, leaders can meet with students in a public place. So if they need to meet one on one, we prefer, they have to meet someplace that where they can be seen.
Hmm.
They can't drive students, which is weird and new and a struggle for us, but they can't drive students one on one.
Uh-huh.
So if they're going to meet with one or two, two students, that's they can drive them. But if not, they have to meet them there and have a parent drop them off. So those are some things that we do. We don't do as much individual texting because we don't want there to be one-on-one communication. So we do a lot of group texts. Uh, but we can't monitor everything. We just try to train our people to do well and have eyes out so that if one leader is not living that up.
Yeah, other people can
But
see it.
yeah.
Yeah, we've kind of had that same thing where you want them to be able to have that safe space, especially if they need to say something to you that they want to keep in confidence, um, or what's the word I'm looking for? Confess something,
Hmm.
that they don't
Hmm.
need everybody and their dog to know. But it's like there's that so very fine line of keeping everybody safe at the same time, and so that is
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah, it is hard.
Hmm.
So you know, we have to remind our leadership that there's no way to be 100% safe to be effective in ministry. We have to there has to be some understanding of what relational ministry looks like,
Hmm.
um, and hold to that.
That makes a lot of sense. Yes. Yeah, we're kind of in
Mm.
that same boat where, I want to help them get to work because they don't have cars. In order to get a car, you need a job to pay for a car.
Yeah.
And so, how can I do that in a safe way where I'm not going to get called in myself? And,
Hmm.
so that is a big struggle for us. All right. I think my questions, we did a really good job answering them. So thank you for that. Do you have final thoughts or back and forth here?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, um, again, I think if I always say if somebody came to our ministry, they'd kind of be underwhelmed with the level of production value that we have, even despite the size church we are. And so we really do practice what we preach with that. Some of it is maybe you get this. I kind of always say that I'm a depressionary youth pastor,
Where you
meaning
hoard everything in case you need it.
yeah,
Yes.
like when I first started, it was like, you're scrimping and saving. And so
Hmm.
I know what it takes to do ministry. And so it's like your grandparents that have, ketchup packets from the 80s
Yeah.
still in their pantry.
The better
Like
containers with the leftovers. Yes.
so when when someone on my team goes, we want to spend this much money on something, I'm like, no, we don't need it, or we don't need to do it.
Right.
And
What's a way that we can do this differently?
yes, yeah,
Yeah,
for
we're
sure.
we
So,
are going to take supplies to Rio Dosa in 2 weeks for the wildfire and the flood disaster. And when I was trying to find a place for us to stay in Lubbock before coming back here, I contacted Tech because I thought, oh, it'd be good to stay in the dorms. We've done that before at other universities. And then they called me back and said, hey, you can come for free because we like what you're doing. And it was like, because I have the money in my
yes,
budget, but like, yeah, I was like running up and down the halls. I was like,
yeah,
let's save that money. We could do other things. So,
yeah. What are you okay? So what are you seeing with what is creating connection with your students?
Well, we are in the middle of a good question. We're in the middle of the rebuilding years. I use a lot of our football terminology here. We're in the rebuilding years. We had a bigger group, and then we had some leadership issues, and then we have a new pastor. And so now we're coming back from that. And so, but it is a lot of that relationship um, building, especially since these are now kids that I had in children's ministry because I've
Hmm.
been there a bit now at this particular church. And so I love it when I pull up pictures of them. Have you noticed that Google Photos, it will AI their faces into little collections? Have you seen this?
Yeah.
Okay. And so I was looking for something and I saw on my phone that there was a picture of one of my, she's going into eighth grade now. And but it was when she was in second or third grade. And I was like, oh my
Wow.
gosh, look at this. And she's going, oh, that's Melissa. Oh my gosh, put that away. And so I love those kinds of connections where like, no, I've known you for a while. I also really like that some of my youth that have completed their journey with us are now turning around to be volunteers
Mhm.
because I know them. I know their past. It's not like some guy off the street. So I really like that. That's been very helpful for us. What about y'all?
Well, I think what you're hitting on is probably one of the biggest things that I see is that long is the longevity
Hmm.
really builds trust with families and with students that helps build that foster that community.
Oh yeah.
And most youth workers never get to the point. I don't know if it's 3 years, 5 years, somewhere between there or beyond. You don't get to the place where you're seeing the fruit of that longevity
Hmm.
and that connection with families. And so, if again, we may be on the high end of how long we've been here at our churches, and I don't think you necessarily need to be somewhere that long,
Hmm.
but the longevity really does help.
Right.
It's that time. And if you think that, well, it's not working in the first 2 or 3 years, it's time to move on to someplace better.
Hmm.
I would really challenge anyone who's listening to this to say, man, building relationships is hard work, and building trust so that people want to stick around. And that takes some sticking to it and
Hmm.
staying longer than maybe you initially thought.
Well, and I think you're right because I think it also the younger kids these days, these young whippersnappers, that they are giving their trust away less. Like you have to earn it hardcore
Yeah.
versus 10 years ago. That they're less likely to give you that trust as easily as they used to. And I don't know if that's just because of the world we live in or if it's the things that have happened. A lot of mine, it's things that happened in their past. Um,
Hmm.
and things that have happened, I mean, this is a big one, things that have happened in churches that have been very so publicized that
Yeah.
that they're less likely to give that trust. So you do, yeah, you have to earn it. I've been at this church for 5 years. I was another one across town for 7 years, and one of my youth from my last church, she is now a full-fledged adult, and her baby, her little girl, is in our MDO program at the church I'm at now.
Mm.
So I go see her twice a week, and but our youth mission trips will come up on my Facebook memories, and I'm like,
Hmm.
and now look at that, and oh, I love that. Like that's super awesome, but also a little bit of
Yeah.
yeah. How long have I been here? This is fine. This is fine. So.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I think that's a big piece of it. You know that and I'm just a big fan of you got to do for your leaders what you want them to do for your kids.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
if you want your leaders to show up in the lives of kids, then you got to show up in their life.
Hmm.
You got to be there for them. You got to invest in them so that they know what they're supposed to be doing for the teenagers that they're shepherding.
That makes sense. Yeah, yeah. It makes me wonder if you show up for that volunteer at their thing outside of church, if that would also have that same like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe you're here, or would they be like,
Hmm.
what are you doing here?
I had a yeah, I had had a volunteer that was a teacher one time, and I was like, "Can I go hang out in your classroom and I'll grade papers or do whatever?" And so I did that several times, and that was just a fun kind of deal where they, oh my gosh, you're showing up in my world, and yeah, it's created some fun memories.
That is fun. Well, so my two are now in youth. And so we've got a whole new world because my youngest is now going in sixth grade. And so we've got this new world of I'm showing up at their stuff because, they're my own children. And I have to remember to show up for them, like for lunch and things like that, just as much as I do for the other kids. Can't leave them out.
Hmm.
But their friends are now sometimes coming to church. And then it's a I don't know what to call you problem.
Hmm.
Like we've got my husband's a band director, and the oldest is now going to be in the high school band, and so are his friends, and they call me Melissa. Youth kids call me Miss Melissa. Band kids call me Mrs. Stevenson. So it's just like hey you is now I think is what's going to come out of
Yeah,
my mouth because
totally.
there's no title problem. But I think that's also fun because I can show up for my oldest at the high school with his friends and get to meet all these other kids and hey come to church and let's talk about this
Yeah.
and just be a safe person for them, so I'm excited about that. I also get to be a band booster for the first time, and
Oh, nice.
yeah, I'm weirdly excited about that. So what big plans do you have for the upcoming summer and school year for y'all's church?
We still haven't done our summer camp, so we're getting ready for summer camp still. That's at the end of July,
Hmm.
and then gearing up for small groups. That's
Hmm.
kind of our kickoff. That's kind of our big thing that I'm in the middle of. That's what this week and next week and the next few weeks is all about.
Okay, so last question, and then I'll let you go because it's about time. But when you get new kids, how do you put them into a small group? How do you figure out where they fit?
We will either find out if they have somebody that they know
Hmm.
from school. That's our number one question is what school do you go to? And then we will also try to, we'll put them with grade and gender. If they don't know anybody, then we'll kind of have a conversation with them and help them feel that out. We also have a lot of in our high school ministry, we have a lot of student leaders.
Hmm.
So we will pair them, if they're brand new, we will pair them with one of our student leaders who knows that their job is to make them feel welcome, and preferably someone from their school.
Uh-huh.
So it's an upperclassman from their school, because that's going to be one of their easiest connections to make. And we just make sure that their first couple, when they're there, that they have somebody by their side who's showing them the ropes and helping them see and know what's going on.
Yeah, there is something about that, the upperclassmen, lowerclassmen relationship that then they feel this is cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're working on the
for
same
sure.
similar things. I asked them about a word. I said, "What's a word that starts with an I that you could do to get people to come to church?" And I was looking for the word invite. They said introduce and include, and I was like, "Those are great words, not what I was talking about." But now so we got this
Yes,
whole invite, introduce, and include that we're going to go with our
that's
community,
great.
right? That they came up with on themselves. So I'm excited about that. So, well,
I might have to steal that. That's
I have
great.
a T-shirt and everything made. Give it to you. Alrighty, Kevin. Thank you so much for coming on today, and I think this was a great conversation. I hope it was freeing for some of our lower budget, smaller churches that they don't have to do the big thing. That they can do great student ministry just where they are. And thanks for everyone that came and listened today. Please go to our website, studentministryconversations.org. If you have something that you want to talk about, come and send us a message there. You can find all our handles and whatnot in the show notes here. But we want to talk to as many people and get as many perspectives as we can in this weird job that we all have and we all love. So thanks for coming. We appreciate it. Y'all have a good day.